Hi, my name is Adam Lewis, and this is my presentation for the MBA 690 Strategic Management class. My presentation today is going to be on Southwest Airlines and their strategic analysis. So, looking at the history of Southwest Airlines, they were not always called that. So, they were founded in 1966 by Herbert Kelleher and Roland King as Air Southwest Company. Changed their name in 1971 to Southwest Airlines, and the idea originally was to fly between three cities in Texas, so Dallas, Houston and San Antonio, and they looked to offer a cheap commuter service between those cities. They began flying out of Love Field in Texas, so they decided to adopt love as the theme for their promotions. They also go by LUV on the New York Stock Exchange, which is just a nice little detail. And the company are always at the forefront of innovation. They were the first airline to offer frequent flyer miles back in the 1980s, and they also happen to be one of the companies at the forefront of technology. So they started with those three destinations. They now fly to over 100 destinations, both in the United States and overseas as well. So their mission and vision statement is slightly different to most companies. They have two mission statements. So the first one, the dedication to the highest quality of customer service, delivered with a sense of warmth, friendliness, individual pride and company spirit, is for the company overall. And for their employees, they have a pledge to be committed to provide their employees a stable work environment with equal opportunity for learning and personal growth. Creativity and innovation are encouraged for improving the effectiveness of Southwest Airlines. And above all, employees will be provided the same concern and respect and caring attitude within the organisation they are expected to share externally with every Southwest customer. So they have a golden rule, which you can find on the About section of their website, along with the mission and vision. And that golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated. And it's pretty simple, but it's a little cultural point that they've added in, and it seems to really work for them. Looking at the vision, simply it's to connect people to what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable and low-cost air travel. And in doing so, they hope to become the world's most loved, most flown and most profitable airline. So just looking at that last little sentence there, the world's most loved, they are huge on customer service, customer satisfaction. They want to be the most flown, and they are proven to be so. They have a large market share, the largest market share in the US from flights that originate there, and most profitable. So they pride themselves that they've been in profit for the last 46 consecutive financial years. So Southwest competitive strategy, from my research, my interpretation of it was that they have a vertical integration, and the way that they show this by keeping things in-house as much as possible is through things like their ticketing policy. So they sell tickets directly through their website. That cuts out the middleman. It means there's no commission, and all the money just goes straight to themselves from those ticket sales. One clever thing that raised eyebrows at the time was the purchase of AirTran in 2011. So the main purpose behind that was really to get into the Atlanta airport, which is one of the largest in the United States. They didn't have an easy way to make inroads there, but AirTran had an existing operation there already. So the two merged in 2011. And it seems to have been working pretty well as they've expanded into the Atlanta area as Southwest Airlines. The last little piece here is the loosely structured contracts that their staff members are under. So they really operate under a see a need, fill a need kind of philosophy. There are going to be days where you do things that might not be quite within your job description, but It saves them on outsourcing things, and it drives efficiency within the company overall. Moving on to their ethics, they have a code of ethics on their website which you can download. So I'll just touch on a couple of the main points from their code of ethics. So the compliance with laws, rules and regulations is fairly straightforward. Don't break the law, adhere to the regulations, and they try to do that. Being such a large company, they sometimes do fall down in that though. Specifically, there was a time in 2009 where the regulatory checks that required to be done on aircraft were not carried out, and this actually ended up with them getting a fine of $7.5 million, according to NBC News. Payments to government personnel is essentially they're not allowed to bribe government personnel, whether that's at home or overseas. And conflicts of interest really relates to any conflict of interest, but the Code of Ethics really specifically mentions the hiring process. So if you are related to someone, that has to be declared and things like that. So with all that, they have their compliance procedures, which the procedure is to, if you see anyone breaking any of the above codes, you are to go to your direct supervisor. If it isn't possible to see your direct supervisor, or if potentially they're the problem, then they direct you towards the Southwest's in-house general counsel. So looking at Porter's 5 forces for Southwest Airlines and the airline industry as a whole, rivalry among competing firms is high. It's a highly competitive industry. There are some different price points. There's ultra low cost carriers. There is the low cost carriers such as Southwest themselves and JetBlue. And then there's the legacy carriers such as United and Delta. So it's highly competitive. There's finite routes that you can really fly on. Not everyone covers every route, but there is definitely a kind of ceiling on how much you can do and remain in profit in the airline industry, especially domestically within the United States. The potential entry of new competitors, there's a high cost, so that's aircraft setup is extremely costly. So there isn't too big of a threat of new entrants, although some of those ultra low cost carriers have been in the last couple of years. Looking at the potential development of substitute products, there aren't currently any substitutes directly for air travel. If you want to get somewhere over a great distance, if you want to get there at speed, air travel is your best bet. Trains and automobiles are alternatives, but they're not quite true substitutes. Looking at the bargaining power of the suppliers, Southwest fly exclusively Boeing 737 aircraft, so that gives them a high amount of power when it comes to bargaining, because they now have found themselves in a place where they cannot switch over to Airbus, the other main competitor. Because of the strength of the fleet, the size of the fleet, there's just no way that it would be feasible for them to move over. Part of their efficiencies is that the mechanics all know the Boeing jets, so there's efficiencies to be got there too. The bargaining power of customers is fairly high. There is, like I touched on, a high number of alternative airlines that you can fly with, some low cost. And when it comes to low cost bookings and things like that, most people will go with the lowest cost available to them. So moving on to the SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths, weaknesses and opportunities and threats. The turnaround times and the efficiencies that I mentioned are a huge strength of Southwest Airlines. They have market leading turnaround times. That means that they can fly more often than traditional competitors. And looking at the strengths and threats together there, They could introduce additional travel routes that could be beneficial to them. As I mentioned before, it is a small part of their business currently, and something that they've just begun to expand into. So that is an area where they have the opportunity to really scale up their offering there. Some of the weaknesses come from the dependence on Boeing, as was mentioned before. As an airline, they also really rely on passenger revenue. There's small freight revenue and then other revenue from fees and things like that. But overall, it is really down to the passengers and that revenue they get from ticket sales for flights. And looking at the threats there, again, the rival airlines are there. A couple of them have kind of gone with Southwest's model of the low cost and driving efficiency. So that they are definitely a threat in the marketplace for Southwest Airlines. So the space matrix here that you can see, the companies I looked at were Frontier and JetBlue, along with Southwest Airlines. So you can see there, Frontier are the youngest of the companies. They ended up in the conservative quadrant, and my understanding is that is really down to they've got a smaller market share. They have some work to do in terms of their competitive positioning as well. So they're kind of the baby of the group. Looking at JetBlue, they are one of the main companies who really tried to take the Southwest model on board and run with it in their own right. They are in the defensive quadrant. And although they are a direct competitor to Southwest, Southwest market share dwarfs them. They're just more susceptible to changes in stability in the marketplace and things like that. So they are in the conservative and defensive quadrants in terms of where they should be going with their strategy, whereas Southwest are in the aggressive quadrant, as you can see there. So really, to me and my understanding is that they can afford a little more freedom as a market leader with such a huge market share. 23% of domestic air travel that originates in the United States, according to their website. So that is market leading. So that, coupled with strong financial results and the profits that I mentioned earlier, means they can be a little more aggressive with their strategies. Looking over the financial ratios for the company, as you can see, fairly consistent between 2016 and 2018 in terms of the figures there. There was an increase in 2017. That was a good year for them. But they do have strong financial prowess, and as I've mentioned previously, 46 years of consecutive profit, and their liquidity is pretty good. They are susceptible to changes in things like the oil price, which can have a negative effect on not only them but the rest of the airline industry. So overall, even though it looks like they took a dip in the last year, the numbers are fairly steady, and they are in a fairly healthy financial shape moving into the future, which allows them to really strategize and, as we saw in the space matrix, be a little more aggressive with their policies. So my recommendations are twofold. The first recommendation is to make upgrades to their fleet of aircraft. So new and more fuel efficient aircraft can improve fuel efficiency by up to 30%, according to some studies. This can negate some of the issues and the threats surrounding the volatility of oil prices, which has a massive effect on the airline industry and what they can offer customers in terms of ticket pricing. Secondly, to this recommendation is to upgrade the existing plane offering. So that could be through the use of technology and things like the onboard Wi-Fi, having that having their own database of movies and music that you could access through your own personal devices on the current aircraft, and doing that through the Wi-Fi could just help increase that kind of premium feel, as there's no differentiation between classes such as first class or economy on Southwest Airlines. It would just help with the overall customer experience, which is at the heart of everything that they do. Second full recommendation is to expand the point-to-point offering. Continue to grow domestic destinations, continue to grow international destinations, and possibly, similar to what they did with AirTran in 2011, consider a merger with another existing airline. So Southwest's offering has been shown to be scalable. It's fairly straightforward. They don't spend a lot of time at the airport. They have quick turnaround times, and they go to desirable destinations. So although they haven't reached saturation point in the US quite just yet, there's still some way to grow and some other areas of the country to explore and fly to. Really going forward, the international destinations could be a game changer for them. This again is scalable. It's easy to analyze. You can look at the things like the load factor and the percentage of the aircraft that's filled for each flight on these new routes. Even for potential mergers, you can look at those figures for the existing operation, and you can really look at ways that Southwest can improve that service and gain efficiencies, and therefore gain some more profit from those operations. So that's the end of my presentation. I realise I've run a little bit over time there, but I do appreciate you taking the time to review my slideshow. So basically, in summation, Southwest, people have modelled their entire business on their strategy. There's numerous airlines across the globe who saw their strategy as a low-cost carrier and looked to employ that strategy themselves. So they are doing a lot of things right currently. They are a huge company, a successful company on many different fronts. So as much as potentially the recommendations look like more of the same, I do believe that those little tweaks could really bring the company forward into a successful position, especially as they look to expand their international offering.